All right, let's get started. I would just like to take a second and welcome everybody to Engineering 217. My apologies for not being able to make the first lecture with helping organize our annual Richard F. McCormick Technical Conference. I wasn't able to make it. So I'm hoping that this online lecture will serve to supplement what was covered in class on Thursday. I just want to thank Dr. Waite for agreeing to come in and cover a lecture for me on Thursday. Just a couple very, very brief announcements. I usually like to start all of my courses by going over some brief announcements before we get into the material. My office hours on Monday and Wednesday are from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. On Thursday, they're from 10 to noon. On Tuesday, they are by appointment. I don't teach on Tuesdays, so there's a chance I won't be on campus. So if you need to meet, just make sure and send me an email in advance. What I want to cover today is just some things regarding the overview of the course, how it's operated, some things I think you need to be made aware of, and then we'll go over tips for a successful resume, because you are going to have some resume submissions come up in the very near future. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. Now, I'm not going to go over the syllabus in significant detail, but I am going to go over the items that I think are most critical to you. I have a soft copy or a PDF uploaded on Blackboard, so you can review that at your leisure. I also know that you got hard copies on Thursday. So everybody in the class should have access to the syllabus. But let me talk about what I think is most critical. First off, the grade. This is a 1 credit hour. Essentially, it's a seminar course, so it's not like typical engineering classes. Really, the grade only comes from 2 areas, and that's the attendance and the actual assignments. And I'll discuss the assignments that we'll have throughout the semester here in a little bit. There are no required textbooks for the course. You don't need to purchase anything. All of the materials that you will need, lecture notes, assignments, any of that stuff is all going to be posted on Blackboard. The way attendance will work, I'm going to distribute an attendance sheet at the beginning of the lecture, so just be on time. A late arrival is going to count as half an absence. I'm a fairly reasonable guy to get along with. If you just let me know that for some reason you're not going to make it, if you're ill, if you have a sporting event, I'm pretty easy to get along with. But if you just don't let me know what's up, obviously I'm going to count that as an unexcused absence. Some of the lectures this semester may be recorded, like this one, and posted to YouTube. I have a YouTube playlist dedicated to the course, and so you can review those at your leisure. I say some. I'm not going to record all of them. In some of my courses, I record all of my lectures, but not really for this one, because there are some days that we won't meet, and there's a lot of days we have some guest speakers, so it's somewhat it's not really periodic that we record. It's only for certain significant reasons, like me missing class on Thursday is when I would record. So that leads into making sure that you check Blackboard regularly. I'm actually going to close the presentation for a quick minute to pull up the Blackboard. This is the student preview Blackboard for the course. So first off, I'll show you. I'm actually going to go backwards. If you go into My Grades, you'll see the grades for the course. This is the attendance and then the assignment average. I do like to keep a running total, so at any one random time, you should be able to log in to Blackboard and know what your grade is at that point in time. As I get grades, I will upload them. I haven't processed the attendance yet from Thursday, but I'll probably do that tomorrow. But I typically try and keep those up to date. I usually update all of my attendance once a week, so you should know your grade pretty regularly. As for the assignments, I usually like to get those graded pretty expeditiously. I'm usually not one to leave those hanging, so you'll know what your grade is in the class throughout the semester as the semester progresses. Now, if you go into course content, you're going to see a couple of things. For instance, first off, you'll see the course syllabus. I have that as a PDF. Like I said, I'm not going to go through that in significant detail, but there will be a couple things I'll pull out here in a second. We have the YouTube playlist. Now, if you click this, it'll take you to, like I said, just a YouTube playlist. The playlist is empty now because this is the first lecture and I'm currently recording it now. But as I finish this recording and as it gets uploaded to YouTube, I'll add it to this playlist. So all of the any recordings for this course will be on that playlist. Now I have actually your first homework assignment is already posted, and it's basically just to prepare your resume, and we'll discuss how that's submitted and whatnot next week. But it's not due next week. It's not due till the following week, so you've got some time to work on that. But you'll see all of your major submissions pop up in this main page. So since homework 1 is the current homework we're working on, you'll see that in the main course content page. The only other thing I think is worth mentioning is the lecture notes folder. And if you open that, I actually have all of the lecture notes for the entire course all posted. Now it's only listed in 5 lectures, but some of these lectures extend over multiple weeks. So for instance, the engineering ethics discussion I know it'll extend over a couple weeks, and the interview process will extend over a couple weeks as well. So these lectures are not there's not a 15-week class. There's only 5 lectures. These extend over multiple weeks, but all the files are there. The only thing that isn't there is this section here for MU career education. Since this course is all about preparing you for your careers as practicing engineers, I have a pretty strong integration with the Office of Career Education here at Marshall, and so there'll be some folks come in and make presentations on various things related to getting a job, preparing resumes, the interview process, things like your presence on social media and its relation to getting a job. And so any of those presentation files I'll tend to store here as they come. But other than that, the entirety of the course's materials are already posted, so other than the homework assignments, which will come as they are assigned. Okay. As for the assignments, there are 6 assignments and submissions throughout the semester. The first is the actual resume itself. You actually submit 2 versions of the resume. You'll submit one preliminary version and then one final version. So the idea is that you submit a preliminary version, it then undergoes edits, or you revise that in some fashion if necessary, and then submit a final version. You'll also submit a potential employer list. So the idea is that you will go and collect data and basically prepare an employer profile on a series of employers that you might want to go work for. It's sort of a means of forcing you to do research about companies you might want to work for. We do have a formal mock interview exercise where you actually will be interviewed by practicing engineers and go through that process. So I feel that that's pretty valuable for a career preparation course like this one. We have an etiquette dinner exercise that we're going to put you through. You'll also have 2 other writing assignments. An ethics writing assignment will present you a fairly complicated ethics case, and you have to sort of put yourself in the shoes of the given individual and ask yourself, what would you do in this scenario? And then finally, we have a continuing education assignment, which is sort of related to obtaining your license as a professional engineer. I'm a licensed professional engineer, and I think that that's definitely an avenue that many engineering students should be thinking about, because all it's going to do is lead to usually more responsibility, more money, more job opportunities. So it's definitely relevant to our course. And so that's co-op in a nutshell. I'll pull up one final thing, which is the syllabus, because, like I said, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but one thing I am going to go through is the schedule. And so I have here the day-by-day schedule for the course. And so, like I said, our first week's lecture, we're covering the course operation and the syllabus. We're also going to talk a little bit about resumes. But a couple things to point out. You will see that I've got the topics of each lecture listed. Also, you'll see that there's a number of days that career education will come in and make presentations, which are really, really important. If you see here on the right, you'll see when assignments are due, and by and large, those assignment due dates will not change unless we have something very, very significant come up. These are pretty much locked in stone. You'll see near spring break, we actually have kind of a unique instance with scheduling where we have basically a month that we won't meet, because we'll meet on Thursday, March the 12th during Lecture 9, And then we won't meet the week before spring break because that will be the week that you perform your mock interviews with career education. So we actually won't meet in class because you'll be doing that. Then you'll have spring break. And then the week after we won't meet because I want everybody to attend the Marshall Career Expo. There'll be a lot of employers there, some dedicated specifically to finding engineering hires, and so it's a really good opportunity for everybody. And so we meet Thursday, March 12th, and then we won't meet again until April the 9th. So there's a fair gap there. I'll make sure and send everybody reminder emails so that everybody's aware. We won't have a meeting on the 16th because of the etiquette dinner. And then, again, like I said, the only component of this grade are attendance and the assignment, so there is no final exam. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody was clear on that. Okay. So I think that's it in regards to the course operation. I don't really think there's a whole lot more to say on that, the course in general. This is a fairly straightforward course. Like I said, it's just attendance and assignments, and everything's on Blackboard. And I hope you get a lot out of this. I want to spend a few minutes discussing my tips for a successful resume. So the way this will work is I will give you sort of, I guess, my suggestions for what I think would be appropriate for you to develop a successful resume. And the next week you'll hear from Career Services, and they'll give you their perspective on what would be good for a resume. And then between those two, you can take those two sets of guidance with your own personal background and experience and develop a successful resume. And that's sort of our task here. So I don't want you to think of this sort of as, oh, it's this homework assignment that's due Thursday. I really would like for you to consider putting some time into this because this is all about you getting a job. I can go ahead and tell you just right off the bat that your resumes will be graded based on completion, not on content. In other words, as long as you go through the process, you're going to get 100 on it. It's all about, but again, I don't want you to think of it as an assignment. It's more about, take this chance and this time to polish and fine-tune your resume to develop a professional document. So a couple things. First and foremost, I think what's arguably one of the most important things about a resume is that it's neat and clean. I can tell you right off the bat, it doesn't matter if you are a Nobel Prize-winning laureate or barely skating by. If your resume is not professional, many employers will look past it. Many employers who are screening hundreds and hundreds of resumes to try and fill given positions are looking for reasons not to consider your resume. If you have a position and there's 100 applicants, the first thing that's going to happen is those HR personnel and those folks screening those resumes are going to take those 100 resumes and they're going to try and whittle them down into a smaller pile, maybe 50, maybe 20, and then from there start doing a more fine assessment. And they're going to be looking for reasons to not consider your resume. And so one surefire way to get your resume kicked out and one surefire way to not get that job is to not have a polished and professionally formatted resume. So make sure that your digital document, you keep it on white paper, black font. Always like to avoid colors on the document. In other words, don't put any fancy colored graphics or images or pages in your resume because, yeah, the first one will look great, but as soon as that thing gets Xeroxed and copied, it'll look horrible, so don't do that. When you print it, always print it to one-sided. Always use a legible font so that usually the rule of thumb is something like 11-point font or bigger, and I wouldn't use any odd fonts. Something basic like Times New Roman, Arial. Times New Roman is pretty much the standard. One of the reasons that odd fonts are sort of bad is so you might have a particular font installed on your computer. Typically, many employers will request that your resume be converted into a PDF. One of the things about PDFs is that they can tend to draw upon your individual computer's data bank of fonts. And so if you use this really wild font that's on your computer and it's not on somebody else's, when they open your PDF resume, they're not going to be able to read anything. So make sure that you're using a standard font, no colors. I'll say one thing about the colors. There's probably one area where I don't think it's the biggest deal in the world, and that's for a hyperlink. So for instance, if you have your email address on your resume and it's a link, you know how electronic documents tend to turn links blue and underlined. I think that's probably fine. Other than that, I think it needs to be just white background, black font. I prefer staples, but it does need to be contained in some fashion. Do keep the formatting consistent. So, for instance, is it going to be a 1/4 or 1/3? How do you format your fractions? Make sure that's consistent. One of the ways that in Word you can go on, you can turn on hidden formatting, and so let me see if I can mess around with that. I actually don't have that turned on my computer, but it might be worth exploring. Let's go to a blank document. Let's see. View. This is actually a good exercise because it might be worth looking at. Actually, let me see if I can address this. Of course, I had to make it out to be very, very complicated. It's actually right here. If you're probably showing my age, since I'm used to this from older versions of Word. If you go right here into the paragraph symbol, there's a symbol right here. It looks like the backwards paragraph symbol. If you click that, it's actually a really valuable section because, for instance, if you start typing a sentence, you can see, if you zoom in, you can see how it places that sort of dot in between the space. Hidden formatting symbols will actually, if you turn this on, it will show all the various, spaces and enters and tabs and indentations throughout your document. It can be a little jarring the first time that you use it, but as you use it, you tend to get used to it, especially if you're preparing a document that's fairly complicated. It can save your life because you can be trying to figure out where page breaks are and where headings are, and it can be difficult to find. Just something to keep in mind. Okay. Other tips, in a resume, if you're fortunate enough to have a lot of experience, usually what you're trying to do is compress a bunch of information into a single page. Usually that's the goal, is to try and optimize the use of your space. And so that can mean using abbreviations. What I would say when it comes to abbreviations is tend to avoid them unless you're positive that you know what they are. So for example, if you're, let's say, an electrical engineer, you probably don't need to write out the term IEEE because most electrical engineers are fairly familiar with that term. However, they may not be familiar with specific abbreviations or acronyms within your field. And so when in doubt, spell it out. For instance, for the civil engineers, you may understand, most civil engineers are well familiar with ASCE, but that doesn't mean they're familiar with AISI or ASCE or AASHTO or some of these other acronyms or abbreviations. So I would say avoid them and spell them out. Unless you're formatting for page length, if the document is 2 pages and could be 1 page solely because of this, I would go for it. But there's also a litany of tricks that you can use where you can mess around with the margins and the line spacings and font sizes and things like that in order to complete that, or in order to get that document back to 1 page. So I try and avoid that. Write out your dates. So today's date would be, for lecture on Thursday, 01/16/2020. I would actually write it out. It adds some formality. For your degree, make sure that you're fully spelling out the name of the degree in your education section. It adds some formality to your documents. I have here this box. These are the degrees in the engineering program at Marshall with the appropriate verbiage, so make sure you use that. Other tips, thing with the resume is you're trying to impress the person that is reviewing them. So I would organize all of your accolades in what I would call the correct order. So your last degree listed first, your last position listed first. Within a given job, and we'll look at write-ups here in a second, but within a given job, put the most glorious duty first, the most prestigious award or honor first. Now, you might get some different advice on this. Personally, I've always felt that all duties should be in the past tense. Some folks say that all your duties should be in the past tense except for your current job, and you should write that in the present tense. I don't know that that's an incorrect way of going about it, or my version is the correct way of going about it. That's just my advice. I think I could be swayed either way, but that's always how I've prepared resumes. And I think the reason I say that is because these are the duties that I've done, so it indicates that I have done them and I have done them correctly. That's just sort of the way that I've always thought about it. Always, I believe what's critical, especially for engineers, is to give some dimension, some volume, some size, some depth to the task that you've done, even if it's something as simple as working at McDonald's. If you were responsible for mopping the floor, well, you could say I mopped the floor. You could also say I was responsible for maintaining a restaurant space of 500 square feet. It gives me an understanding of what it is that you've done if you added some dimension to it. And it also sort of I think it indirectly gives your task a little bit more prestige if you're able to give that that volume to it. So definitely make sure that you're doing that. Be as objective and specific as you can. You need to tell the truth, but you also need to recognize that this is a document where you're trying to sell yourself. I remember a student a while back, she had a fellowship, and it was a fairly prestigious fellowship where she was spent a summer at the University of Virginia doing all sorts of material testing for some unique materials for civil engineering applications. And on her resume, she put, I just did some testing in the lab. And we looked at her resume. I said, how about you were, instead of just saying you did some testing in the lab, how about you say you were selected as one of so many students for a prestigious fellowship across, a mid-Atlantic region, and, was selected to engage in this opportunity. And the long story short is that there was a way of reflecting that experience. There was a way of expressing it that they were both true, but one gave it far more prestige. And so make sure that you're being objective and you're telling the truth, but you also do kind of want to sell yourself. And usually the more specific you are, you're actually kind of doing that indirectly. So be specific, be objective. Don't include high school data. I understand that if you're a freshman or maybe even a sophomore, it can be difficult to not include high school data because you just don't have the experience. That's understandable, but the reason for that is it's typically understood that in professional settings, your journey towards being a professional began when high school ended. That's not to say that there might not be some, unique opportunities that you should mention, or maybe some volunteer efforts and service opportunities that you did in high school that might be worthy of mentioning. But by and large, if you've got the material to avoid mentioning high school data, you should avoid it. Avoid a skills section unless there are really special skills or you need to fill out a page. When you have a skills section at the bottom that just says, I'm good with people, I'm proficient in Microsoft Word and things like that, usually that's you needing to fill out the space. And there's nothing wrong with that, especially as a college student when you don't have, you're new at this. You just started developing your career. So there's nothing wrong with that at this stage. It's more for maybe when you get out of here that you probably want to avoid that. Now, I will say that it says here, avoid skills section unless it's really special skills or really special courses. I do believe in tailoring resumes to specific jobs. You're going to develop an experience set throughout your years as a professional, and when you're or when you're in the job search, certain jobs are going to require different skills than others. And so maybe you want to rearrange things or rewrite things on your resume to lend weight to particular skills, and I think that's great. Here's an example. A former student of mine wanted to apply for a series of jobs, and one of the jobs he wanted to apply for was as a bridge inspector. and we were going through his resume, and he asked me, should I leave this one item off or take it on? Or should I leave this one item on or should I take it off? And the item was that this student was a certified scuba diver. Well, for any other job, I would say take the scuba diving off. But because he was applying for a job as a bridge inspector, I said, no, leave that on, because many bridges have piers that go into the water and require underwater inspection. And so having certification as a scuba diver actually helps you in that field. But at any other instance, I'd probably take it off. So it's okay to put that in there, especially if you're tailoring to a certain degree. And the same thing with relevant courses. I tend to tell students to leave relevant courses off. So for instance, if you're a mechanical engineering student, every mechanical engineering student is going to have thermodynamics and heat transfer and machine element design. You putting that on your resume saying that you had those courses tells me that you're no different than any other. Now, if you decided to go out of your way and take a specific course in nanomaterials or finite element analysis or computational fluid dynamics, then okay, that's unique. Go ahead and put that on there, because many students are not going to have that. One rule of thumb of looking at this is if you're applying for a job and 20 other students are applying for that job, how can you set yourself apart? That's sort of what you want to be thinking about on the resume. If you have a bulleted list, I think it should have 3 bullets. It's just me, depending upon how you format your document. Work experience. List any and all relevant work experience. And actually, let me take the word relevant out. List work experience, period. Any job that you've had, put it on there. I don't care if it's working at McDonald's. I don't care what it is. Put it on there that you've had experience in the profession. It shows grit. It shows that you're willing to work, and so the more work experience, the better. Don't put references on a resume. Those include references just on a completely separate page, or just have that information necessary. However, one sort of, I don't want to say pet peeve, but one thing I definitely want to impress upon you is do not put a reference on your resume unless they know about it. So, for instance, I have had circumstances where I've had a student list me as a reference and I didn't know about it, and I was working at the office and I desperately had to go home. I had an appointment, and next thing you know, I get a call, and one student had put me down for a reference, and next thing you know, I'm on a reference call, and I'm in a hurry and trying to rush through the call, and so that probably wasn't. You do your best to make sure that you're giving the student a good reference, but it's kind of difficult when I didn't know it was coming. However, if I knew that I'm probably going to be getting a call on Tuesday at 3:30 or whatnot, then I can plan for that accordingly, and the timing works out a lot better. So just make sure that you're letting your references know. With that, I only have a couple other things I want to show. Let me see. So I've uploaded. If you go to Blackboard in the course content section, so here's Blackboard, and I'm in course content. So if you go to lecture notes and supplements, you'll see the lecture notes from the presentation I just went through. And then I have a series of documents, like an example resume, an example reference list. If you need cover letters, I've got that. I really sort of right now want to focus on the first one and the last one. The first one is right here. This is an example resume document. You don't have to use this format. This is just sort of something that you can use to go off of. You don't have to include all of these sections or list it in this very fashion. This is just sort of for your review. And so, you've got your heading, the objective, objective statements. There's conflicting schools of thought as to whether or not you should include them or not. I don't think that there's an issue with that, especially as a student. Your objective is going to say, okay, I'm wanting to attain a job in this career, so on and so forth. So I don't think there's a big problem with that. However, if you've got a lot of experience and you need to cut space, an objective statement might be something that you cut in order to make room for another job that you had. I think that the employment is much more important. Your education, your registration, any licenses that you have. For any of you that take the FE exam, the day that you pass it needs to be the day that you go onto your resume and you indicate that you have passed the FE exams right off the bat. Then your experience, you can note for this document they're going from in chronological order, and you can see all of the various positions. And for each of these positions, you can see that there's a series of bullets that have been written to delineate and to describe what this particular individual did. And it's not just I tested soil. It's, there's developed testing programs and designed foundations and served as a client contact for various projects and supervised the staff of 17 people. You can see that the actual responsibilities this person had. Those write-ups are very, very important to your resume. And I also have another document that just lists some example write-ups, not just for the engineering side of things, but for the non-engineering side of things. And I'd argue for you all as students, this might be even more important than the first document, because most of you in this course, if you have work experience, I would say that a lot of you have work experience that is not in the engineering field. You worked at a department store, you worked at a convenience store, you worked at Walmart, you worked at McDonald's, you worked as a snowboard instructor over the summer, as a cashier. All of these jobs have specific tasks and duties that you kind of need to delineate on your resume to, give your work experience more credence and more visibility. So I want you to use these as an example to formatting your resume. So I think you should review these, as well as the other documents, but particularly 1 and 5 I think are going to be the most help for your first homework assignment. Now speaking of, like I said, you do have a homework assignment, but it's not due this week, it's due the following week. If I go back to course content, that's homework assignment 1. Next week, on the 23rd, we're going to discuss the means by which you submit this assignment through job tracks. I'll go ahead and tell you this now. So, like I said, there's a preliminary submission and a final submission. The way that this is going to work is you're going to submit your document through a system called job tracks, which is really easy, really straightforward. Once you submit this, Career Services is going to go through and review your resume. Okay. Now, a couple things might happen during this review process. One thing they might do is they might look at your document and say, it's good to go, it's fine, needs no edits. Once they do that, you're good. You do not need to resubmit. So I want to be crystal clear. Once Career Services gives you the go-ahead that your resume is ready to go and needs no additional reformatting, you do not need to resubmit. Okay, so I know it says there's a preliminary submission due on the 30th of January and a final submission due on the 13th of February. Once Career Services says you're good, you're good. Okay, so like I said, option 1 is they might look at your resume and say it's good to go. The second thing that they might do is they might look at your resume and they might see that there's an item or two that needs to be corrected, and they'll go in and tweak it, and then you're good. And in that instance also, you are fine. You need no further revisions. The third is they might look at your resume and they might see that it needs more substantial edits and more substantial work. And then that's when you have, your preliminary submission and your final submission. But if they go in and just tweak it themselves, or if they tell you that your preliminary submission is fine, again, you do not need to make the final submission. And you are graded based on completion, not on content. I'm not going to look at one student's resume and say that it's quote-unquote better than another's. So you just need to do it. By doing it, again, you'll receive full credit. So that's it. That's really all I have for discussion today. What we're going to do next time is Career Services is going to come in. So let me pull the schedule up real quick. So that's what we talked about today. Tomorrow, or on Thursday, during Lecture 2, Career Services is going to come in. They're going to talk about their perspective on resumes, some do's and don'ts. So between our two guidances, they might come in and give you a different perspective, and between those two perspectives, you can prepare your document. They're also going to tell you exactly how to submit those through JobTrax. It's a link through MyMU, and they'll show you how to label it so that they'll see it and whatnot. And then you'll submit that by the following week. Once we finish with that, we're going to start discussing some professional concepts that I think you need to be aware of as engineers. Some of you, if you've had engineering internships, you'll be familiar with some of this. Some of it might be brand new if you've never worked in the engineering field. Like how do you properly fill out a timesheet? What are the various construction and contract documents that you need to be aware of if you're a consultant engineer and things like that, regardless of your field. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close the lecture. Like I said, just review those documents and begin work on your resume, and I will see you on Thursday. All right, take care.